which are very popular, but many of us don't really know how they work. So we asked one of our producers, Alex Kushner, to do a little show and tell for us. Let's take a look.
Halo is a first-person action shooter game. You are a colonial marine, and your objective is to take down the aliens from another planet. The weapons they use in Halo are futuristic, kind of AK-47 type weapons, fully automatic weapons that probably could take out, 50 to 100 guys realistically if it was a real weapon. Call of Duty is another first-person shooter. Takes place in present day. You play as an elite Navy SEAL soldier, and your job is to take down terrorists across the globe. And use real weapons like a 50 caliber rifle, an M4, 9mm, a rocket launcher, real weapons. You're shooting real people in the game. They're humans. There's real blood. There's real violence, explosions. Realistic combat you would see in a real war zone.
Psychiatrist Dr. Michael Wellner has been with us throughout the hour to help us better understand video game obsession. And we're also joined now by Colleen Moore, a counselor with the Illinois Institute of Addiction. So what impact does playing violent games have on an individual's behavior? What does it do to them in terms of their impulse control or even to their neurological state?
I think research is still wrestling with that, but what we've been able to establish is that violent video games increase the arousal, increase hostility in a number of people who play them. And they neurologically affect the player in such a way that they're desensitized to violence, desensitized to gore. So the combination of arousal and even enticement to violence may come outside of the video game, but the desensitization is a very key element of how they affect us.
And Colleen, have you found that some people are more susceptible than others? I mean, are these people who have inherently addictive personalities?
Well, I think that many of us have some component of addictive personality, but there's an equation that I like to use that identifies and helps me understand how this can become an addiction. The equation is accessibility, so having access to the behavior or the game, plus acceptability with someone's environment to continue to engage in this behavior, continue to engage in the game, plus a predisposing factor, which can be one of three things, and that could be a genetic component. And what research is showing now is that it's not just a family history of alcoholism like we're used to hearing about. There may be alcoholism in the family, but we're also now seeing video game addiction within the family, along with alcoholism, gambling, and things such as that.
A genetic component.
Genetic component.
To me, even though more research is necessary, they're showing now that technology actually increases the dopamine in your brain, the pleasure center in your brain. So doesn't it only make sense, Dr. Wellner, that the prolonged use of these games would, for some people, increase the dopamine in their brains as well?
Well, sometimes research isn't needed. When you hear Quinn Pitcock basically telling you, I have every reason to be invested in my career, and I basically threw it all away, that's a very familiar story to anyone who's dealt with the addiction model. So whether it's dopamine or whether the game is designed in a particular way to continue to absorb people for hours on end with different scenarios and different changes, I don't think that the game developers are blameless. I think they're absolutely complicit in just as the tobacco industry was, and that's why they have to be dealt with the same way.
How do you treat it then? How do you wean someone off these games?
Well, we treat it very similar to someone who suffers from alcoholism, someone who suffers from a food addiction. We really have to focus on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors before, during, and after being on the internet. Now, we can say to someone, stop using, engaging in the game, but we may not be able to say stop being on the internet.
Jim Steyer is the founder and CEO of Common Sense Media, which studies the impact of media and technology on kids. Jim, I know that you spoke with White House officials during the aftermath of the Newtown shootings. And Adam Lanza apparently did play violent video games, we've since learned. What did you tell the White House officials?
We said, look, there is a culture of violence in this society. And like all of our guests have said,
you can't just blame violent video games for all these actions. But are they a contributing factor to a culture of violence? They clearly are. And the video game industry largely is in a culture of denial. They constantly blame parents. They constantly say there's nothing, there's no pure research. The truth is, we know this is an issue. The White House knows it's an issue. They proposed research, by the way, $10 million, and the industry's opposed that as if they say there's not a problem here. So we have a culture of violence and a culture of denial going on.
In fact, Jim, I know the industry fended off government action 20 years ago.
Right.
I think Captain Kangaroo even testified that more restrictions or regulation was necessary, but they fended it off by putting ratings labels on video game boxes. Why isn't that enough in your view?
Well, first of all, that's the fox guarding the chicken coop. The truth is, how would we let an industry that denies the science, this is like climate change deniers, then say, we'll rate everything and don't worry, all parents need to do is read the box, where there are no laws that restrict the sales. This is a big issue, and the industry has basically buried its head in the sand and actively opposed positive measures.
You supported a move in California that would prohibit
Correct.
young people, anyone under the age of 18, from buying video games, correct?
Correct.
And it did not pass.
It did pass, and then it was struck down by the Supreme Court on free speech issues, on the idea that a teenager has a free speech right to play the game, which we thought was silly. It was about sale. It's like alcohol or tobacco sales to minors.
In fact, Anthony Scalia, in that Supreme Court decision, which basically said it was unconstitutional to restrict video game sales, wrote that evidence linking games to violence was unpersuasive, and they have the same legal protection, meaning the video games, as violent literary classics like Grimm's Fairy Tales or Snow White.
Well, all I'll say this is Justice Scalia was my con law professor at Stanford, and he was frequently wrong as my con law professor. And he was wrong on that one, and other justices agreed. And the public has to demand more, and our politicians have to have some courage backing the needs of families in this country.
Well, we want to mention that we reached out repeatedly to the Entertainment Software Association. It represents the video game industry. We asked them for a comment about Daniel Petrick's case and about video game addiction and violence in general, and we did not get a response. Up next, does someone you love have a video game obsession? Dr. Wellner will be here to tell us the signs. That's right after this.
Real South Florida viewers are waiting.